doing real good, man. I was getting a little concerned with you, man. Look at that. You're the only one who ever got one of them.
How's that possible?
I know it's not, it's unreal. In fact, it's spooky. It's supernatural.
There you go.
Man, I was getting worried, man. I thought maybe a nutcracker or a little Chucky doll or something was chasing you around the computer and you couldn't log in.
No, AOL is on the home PC. So I'm running back and forth between the home PC
Uh-huh.
and my office laptop, which can do Zooming on Gmail.
Uh-huh.
So until I got it on the Gmail, I wasn't able to connect.
Oh, okay. Hey, I got a question for you. Now we refer to you as Cryptmaster Chucky.
Yes.
I'm going to reverse that, aka Charles Rosenay. But you do any crypt keeping? I mean, are you masters of the crypts?
It's a persona, like a horror host.
Uh-huh.
So if I do conventions and I dress up in and look like this, it's Cryptmaster Chucky.
Uh-huh. I saw that. Wow. That seemed like an app. That makeup was done so well. I thought that was an avatar.
Oh wow, no, that's my own makeup. Yeah.
Well, what got you started into horror?
What got me started is my mom forcing me to watch Bride of Frankenstein on the $1 Million Movie back when I was a wee little one.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while, but I fell in love with it and couldn't stop. It wasn't horror then, it was monsters. We called them monster movies. And I was hooked, and I've always loved the three things I've loved growing up: the Beatles, rock and roll,
Right?
monster movies, all the scary stuff, and baseball.
Well, how does the Beatles fit in that?
You know what? I always said my first memory in life was seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and that I was really hooked at that point. But when I wrote the book, I realized that watching Bride of Frankenstein with my mom was probably the first memory in life. That was before it. But those were the two indelible, memories that just stuck with me. And I don't know, man. If you love something so much as a kid, it's usually either you grow out of it or it sticks with you. I didn't grow out of it; it stuck with me on both of them.
Hey, somebody asked if you'd hold that cup up again. All right. Oh, wow. That brings back the memories right there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Love it.
Yeah. Hey, so yeah, man, I can easily see a segue from the Beatles to horror because Paul's dead, right? And we got his zombies took his place.
There you go. Someone took Paul's place when he died, right? If you believe that, then there is a connection there. But you know what? If you watch Yellow Submarine, Frankenstein's in the movie, and then he turns into John Lennon.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of you got to reach for him. A lot of 6-degree separations of connections between them. But it's just loving two completely separate things, and I've turned both of those things into not just my love and passions, but some of the things I do for a living involve the Dracula tours and the Beatle tours, and I've been doing those for a long time.
Well, I would say something about the Beatles, like say perhaps this magazine here.
Wow, that's very impressive. Yeah, it's funny because people would say forever, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And I published Good Day Sunshine for nearly 2 decades. And, some of those were 80 pages, 100 pages. And I would say, man, I'm doing a book every other month. I'm doing 6 books a year. I've done hundreds of them. I'm not ever doing a book. And they would say, well, you got to do a Beatles book. You got to do a book about your entertainment field. And I said, nah, but the horror book was really what was in my blood, and that's what we put out first.
Maybe you could sell an ongoing argument. Beatle fan myself, arguing here with the people watching the program. We got some naysayers out there, Chucky, to say where it says I buried Paul. They saying it's cranberry sauce. Which is it?
So it could be one of 3 things. It could either be I buried Paul, or I'm very bored, or cranberry sauce, which sounds like the furthest of the three,
No,
right?
it sure does. I can't.
Uh, I'm guessing that it was I Buried Paul, but that afterwards, they didn't want to, it
Mhm.
wasn't really cool that Lennon would have said, I buried
Mhm.
Paul. So they came up with a different translation of it. But
Well,
it's not just that. It's you put stuff on backwards and you're going to hear, turn me on, dead man, turn me on, dead man. There's a lot of creepy stuff that are connected to the Paul McCartney death clues. That could be a whole
mhm.
special. We can do a whole show on just that.
Hmm. Well, hey, you got the Abbey Road where we got George Harrison's the crypt keeper, isn't he?
Well, we've been going to Abbey Road, Penny Lane, Strawberry Field since the 80s,
Hmm.
since 83. We've been doing it
Hmm.
every single year, a magical history tour. And, I had a partner who's since passed. His name was Dan. He said, what else do you love? What other tours can we do? And I said, well, I love the monster stuff, but ain't no way we can figure out how to get to a third world country like Romania. And he said, yeah, of course we could. And we did the research. We found all the castles. We found where Vlad was buried, where he was born. We were able to connect, as you know from our interview years
Hmm.
ago, the legend of Dracula, the fiction, the novel, Bram Stoker's great, book,
Hmm.
together with the history and the truth, the accuracy of Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, and it makes for just the most amazing trip. We've been doing that since the 90s. People, you say there's no business where you're going to get 100% satisfaction, right?
Hmm.
If you're a car dealer, if you're a radio DJ, no matter what you do, right?
Hmm.
We get 100% satisfaction. People who go on these tours just have the greatest time. And I think it's because it's a shared love, and it's some places that people thought, they dreamed about going all their lives and thought they'd never go to Transylvania, never go to Liverpool. And, we make it happen, and it's very special.
Okay. All right. We've got a number of people watching the program. And by the way, welcome in the live chat, Roxy there. Rose says, Crip, what do you think about them saying Dracula really existed and is related to some famous people?
So, I guess if you're stretching it, you can say a Dracula existed, Dracula meaning dragon. Vlad was called, the evil dragon. Dracul is how we say it in Romania. So there's a connection. It's A, B, C, D, the 6 degrees of separation between Dracula and Vlad. But he was never a vampire. He impaled people, he let the blood drip out, and he was evil, and he had, a lot of who, man, in those days, you showed your enemy how you felt. And to his country, he was a great, great, he was a great leader. But, the people who he impaled and did nasty stuff to, yeah, it's probably worse than a vampire could have done.
Well, what is it with the Vlad? Because right now, Vladimir Putin is impaling Ukraine. So what
So,
is it about Vlad? Is that some kind of secret code?
oh man, I don't know. Maybe
They're getting impaled over there, bruh.
we're cracking something. I don't think that's a very popular name. I can't imagine a lot of moms naming their kids Vlad. But it was very much of an Eastern European name, a very much of a Russian, Romanian, that part of the world name. So it's very common, actually. Vlad, Radu. There's certain names that are like John, like Dan. They're so common, but less and less, obviously.
And I think I mentioned this to you last time, but I'll bring it up again. We were talking about Dracula, vampires, and such. But in the literal sense, there are evidences of something of that nature. And one of those is the way that the early Europeans, particularly maybe even Transylvania, would bury people and they would bury them and they put a brick in their jaw. Did I discuss that with you last time?
No, that's interesting. Also in that part of a country, when they believed someone was a witch and they buried them, they would bury them with actual either chains or metal bars or
Hmm.
iron, bars
Hmm.
over in the fear that someday they'll find a way to get out.
Hmm.
But the brick, that's interesting. What's
Yeah. Yeah.
the
No, they found, I don't know how many, maybe hundreds of them, but the bricks in the mouth of the skull is to prevent the deceased from rising and biting someone, biting the living. They believed that the brick in the mouth would prevent that.
It
and
would.
so Google
It
that,
sure
man.
would.
Put that in your repertoire and Google that.
It sure would. It's so much. I love folklore. I love stuff like that. And when you go to Vlad's burial place, Snagoff Monastery, it's not far from Liverpool, from Transylvania, and that's Vlad calling now. Vlad, sorry, we cannot talk to
Get
you.
him on the
We're on
line.
a conference call. What I was going to say is, when you go there, it's a beautiful monastery. It's been redone. It's on a farm. There's a crazy, I don't want to say crypt keeper, but there's a crazy guy who runs it. And what they did is they unearthed the grave some years back, and they didn't find human bones. They found animal bones there, and everything was there except a head. And so it was believed that when they buried Vlad, they buried him separately. They buried his head somewhere and then his body bones elsewhere. But even atop that, they didn't bury him where they said he was buried. They buried animal bones there to keep it even. So there's no way anybody would have accidentally or purposely put all the bones together and him possibly come back to life.
And that theme of beheading people goes into that movie series called Highlander. The only way to kill a Highlander was to remove the head. But in ancient civilizations, removing the head was quite the thing to do. Now, of course, you get to the Egyptians, and what they would like to do in a gory type of way, they would get their enemies, and they'd have this drill saw looking thing, and their live victims, they shut up the nose. It would go into the brain, and they would mix it around till the brain dripped out and then they would drink that to get the knowledge. So there's in civilizations, there's a long history of weird, and some would say satanic, but they didn't know it better. They thought that was the way to win over their enemies. Of course, in the Aztecs and those they would rip a beating heart out of somebody, and the conquistadors, in the Spanish, when they saw that, they just couldn't believe that such bloodthirstiness was going on. But of course, now today they've rewritten history and saying, well, they was all nice people, and so what if they ripped out beating hearts? We had Christopher Columbus didn't have any right to take the gold. But I don't know. It sounds like everybody's wrong on all fronts. But let's moving on. Freely Speaking says, are you familiar with Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses, and do you like his style of horror?
Well, I happen to love that movie, and it's got Sid Haig in it, and it's got Bill Moseley, it's got some really great people. I'm not quite sure I'm as enamored with Rob Zombie's do-overs like Halloween, and if I'm not mistaken, he's going to be doing a Monsters one, and I got my fingers crossed. I tend to like Rob Zombie's original stuff, Three from Hell and Corpses and all those. Yeah, I love that stuff, but given my preference, I'd rather see a thriller, something psychological. I don't need slashing. I don't need, porn, torture, horror. That's not my favorite genre, but I will see it because I don't know if it's obligation, Dan. I don't know what it is, but I feel I have to see every horror movie when it comes out. It's part of my makeup.
Wait. Did you say you love a good corpse?
Don't we all love a good corpse?
Okay, I thought you said. Wow. Okay.
No. We're not getting into necrophilia
here. Okay.
Part of the discussion.
Okay, no, we're not. And and that's the thing. I agree with you on what was the underlying tone there, and that is a good story. You don't necessarily have to have the really disgusting bloodletting and how many ways can you butcher a human being.
Right.
Extremely graphic close-ups. To me, that just says you're lacking a story, and you're trying to. You could have a good story and depict the same event without ever showing it if your story writers are good enough. And so the same thing with sex. I mean, if you're lacking of a good story, you're gonna put some nude in there. Put a top shot or whatever. Who knows what? So I'm thinking, is that all you got? How about tell me a story and take me away? That's the point of book. That's why we read books. That's why we watch magazines. You know, or did I say watch magazines? See,
You did.
I went Joe Biden on you.
Did he just say that?
Or I'm playing that backwards because of the Mandela effect. But hey, so a book of the top 100 horrors. What's going on with that?
Well, see, it's funny because you mentioned, the slasher, the killing movies,
Mhm.
and then you look at the cover of my book, the book of top 10 horror lists, and we've got Karloff, and the only real, I don't know, I guess George Romero, A Night of the Living Dead, is as close, or Pennywise, it is as close as we come to the modern horrors, because this is my favorites, Lon Chaney and Bella and Boris. Anyway, what I did is I got 100 celebrities to give me their top 10 favorite horror themes. And it was favorite horror movies, favorite horror actors, favorite scenes in horror movies, favorite nude scenes in horror movies, favorite soundtracks. And really, we got amazing, amazing feedback from people like, they should rest in peace, Ed Asner, William Shatner, one of the Monkees, one of the Beatles, one of the Munsters, Ruth Buzzy. I could go on and on. Scream queens and horror icons and actors and rock stars. There's like 6 rock and roll Hall of Famers. There's a baseball Hall of Famer. And they all gave me their lists plus reasons why they picked each of the top 10 that they picked. And this took me a long time to put together, but very, very proud of it. And people are just loving it. The reviews on Amazon are great. And the feedback I'm getting from the people just through the roof.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody likes a top 100 list. I mean, I certainly do. I'm always looking what's trending on Twitter. Of course, I don't know. That's a horror show right there. Anyway.
Well, top 10 lists. They're short. They're fun. You could read one and then put down the book and get to it the next day. You don't have to do a 300-page sit through. Mm-hmm. And it's people going to just love looking up and seeing if their favorite movies match William Shatner's favorite movie, or whoever the celebrity is that they happen to be on their page. It's fun. It's fun doing that. What we did at the end is we listed all the movies that were picked in the book and which celebrities picked them. So there's a great reference. If you love Psycho, you can go through the list and say, oh, wow, this guy picked it, she picked it, they picked it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we also did a top 10 of the top 10. So we took of all the lists, we picked which films were voted the most. So which was number 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you guess what came in number 1 in the book of top 10 horror lists?
I'm going to guess The Shining.
It's in the top 10, but not number 1.
Hang on, man. Let's play this thing. The question is, what's the number 1 horror movie?
Of the 100 celebrities.
Of the 100. Okay.
To the book. So we did a top 10 of all the top 10s. And I will tell you, The Shining came in 3rd.
Well, thank you very much. I know I'm just that good. All right, people watching the program, you're watching Cryptmaster Chucky here. We're talking about what is the number 1 horror movie that came in on his top 100 list. So people in the live chat, so don't tell us, Cryptmaster, until some people start logging. I'll see it. I'm watching the chat. So what do you think the number 1 horror show is? And I was talking about how it didn't have to be gruesome. When you mentioned Psycho, wasn't that with the combination of the music and the knife? But if I recall, you never see the knife going in, right?
Never.
Your mind fills. See, that's the genius of that. Your mind fills that in.
Hitchcock was brilliant. I mean, there's so many cases of that where the imagination is so much greater than it's just seeing the actuality. The actuality is easy. You can always show it, but how many people wouldn't go into showers after Psycho for so many years?
Probably a lot.
How many people wouldn't go into the water after Jaws? There's certain movies, if they have that kind of effect, that's pretty brilliant,
Okay, so if somebody hits it, we'll stop it and just go with it. We've got one that says The Exorcist.
Who said it? Let's give them the credit.
Okay, it looks like Jade, our moderator, said it.
Number 1.
All right. Exorcist. And then Cycle 2, Shining 3. All right. And then another lady, Azur, said it was The Exorcist. So people clubbed. Now here's one. Truth and Treasure said The Blob. And
The Blob is definitely in this book.
Now, it is. Now, here's the thing about The Blob, Crypt. It was a little tacky,
cheesy.
But watching this scared the crap out of me. coming through the vents and whatnot.
As kids, certain things, that we look at now and see them as campy and cheesy and corny, and say, how could it have scared us then? It scared us then, I mean, Dracula in its day was so scary and so atmospheric. And if you watch it now, it's slow moving and it's creepy, but he's not, you're not getting scared of this guy. And I think it's generational. There's some that's why The Exorcist came in number one. Whatever, how many years old it is, it still freaks you out. It's still scary. And there's not a lot of movies that scare you, the way certain movies do. But I think it's whatever you grow up with. We talked about in the beginning of the show, I grew up with the Beatles, I grew up with Monsters. So I've loved that all my life. People who grew up with disco or new wave will love that stuff. And people who grew up with The Shining and The Exorcist, that'll be theirs. My kids grew up with, Mama and The Orphan, so there's a whole another generation of films that they love because that's what they grew up with.
Another good storyteller is M. Night Shyamalan. Is that say that right?
The best. And Sixth Sense has got to be one of the most brilliant films ever made. I don't know if he's lived up to that. He's done a lot of other great films, but that ranks up there. That and The Others are the two films. If you haven't seen it and you don't know that there's a trick ending, but most of us do, those are just jaw-dropping movies.
No, I love The Others. I absolutely agree. And the way they rode you along the whole way until you find out it's the exact opposite of what was going on. So I love that. Another one of his movies is Signs.
Signs is good, yeah.
Okay, now what is? Let me ask you, what is Signs about?
What is it about? It's about aliens, right?
No, it's a trick question.
Tell me, please.
It's not about aliens, and it took me watching it 3 times to find out what it was about. What it is actually about is that life has a purpose, and random events mean something. They use the alien theme as the carrier. But if you think about it, everything in the movie that seemed odd and peculiar came to fruition at the very end. We were watching aliens. Well, they're alien here. We're going to battle aliens over there, and there's crop signs. But then in the midst of that, you had the little boy who had an asthma problem. The little girl, every time she had a glass of water, she said there's amoebas in it. And then his brother who struck out, and he couldn't play baseball, but he could swing a bat. At the very end of the movie, it all came together. And then the priest, the father who lost his faith, thinking in the beginning that when his wife was killed by M. Night Shyamalan, the guy in the movie, that all events are just random and there is no God. But the carrier was the aliens. So at the very end, the alien tries to kill the boy, but he can't because he has an asthma attack. The little girl spills the water on him and burns him to death, and there's a bat on the wall where he takes it and swings and hits that. So all the events came to head of why each thing has happened to each person in their life, and the end result was life has a meaning and there's a divine, more or less, purpose. But the carrier is the alien thing, and if you don't catch that, and I didn't catch it to about the third movie. That's what the movie is really about.
I have to watch it again, and I don't know if I'm more impressed that you caught that and I didn't, or that you could pronounce M. Night's name. That's more impressive to me. I probably butchered it myself. All right, hey, let's get to another question for you, Charles, and we got this coming in here. This is from Bear. Did the original The Fly make your list? Well, it made some. I mean, not me personally, but I'll tell you exactly. Let's look and see who picked The Fly. It's a great question, and we can do that. It's fun to do that. The Fly, 1958, of course. Little Anthony from Little Anthony and the Imperials picked it. Don Grady from My Three Sons. Murray Langston, you know who that is?
No.
He's the unknown comic. He used to come on the Gong Show with the bag. Gary Puckett from Gary Puckett, and Gary Von Syock, who was John Lennon's guitarist in The Elephant's Memory. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people picked the original Fly, and one person, country music star Tim Atwood, picked the remake of The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, 1986. That's the fun of this, is seeing who picked what. But yeah, The Fly definitely was picked a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Life Station Express says, my husband Richard wants to know what you thought of Phantasm.
Wow. So I know that Phantasm has an incredible following, and there were multiple films. And Roger Bannister, he was a great villain, great, horror monster, so to speak. I loved the first one, and I thought it was diluted as it went. But you just think of that thing flying at you and all that. Phantasm has its own really big core of followers who just love that film. There's certain films, Suspiria is another one, Carnival of Souls, that never really made it to that mainstream, oh, this is one of the best horror movies ever. But the people who love those films love them rabidly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we have this here from Put Yahweh First says, what is your favorite baseball team? His is the Cardinals.
Well, he's probably a St. Louis guy if he's saying that. I'm a Mets fan. I was born in the Bronx, went to see a lot of Yankee games growing up, but Dad was a Dodger fan and went to see them in Brooklyn. And when they moved to LA and the Mets came in, we became Mets fans. So I follow the Mets to this day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we mentioned the Beatles, and you briefly said something about the Monkees, and I seem to have sent you an email with Monkees in the name. Are you doing something with the Monkees?
So interestingly enough, the Beatles are the top. They're you can't get any higher. But for me, the Monkees were always second. When I was a kid and, the Beatles were putting out Sgt. Pepper and the White Album, it was a little over my head, I'll be honest. So I was still listening to AM radio and to me, the Monkees were the closest thing to the Beatles. And for years, they weren't cool.
Mm-hmm.
No one gave the Monkees any respect
Right.
until they reunited in the 80s, and it became a little cooler. But I've always been an apologist for the Monkees. I became very close with all the guys, Davey and Peter especially. Again, wherever they are, bless their souls. I produced Beatle conventions and Monkees conventions through the years, and that's
What's your favorite Monkey song?
Growing up, believe it or not, my favorite song of all time wasn't a Beatles song. It was a Monkey song, and it was Daydream Believer.
Mm-hmm.
And now it tends to go towards Shades of Grey
Mm-hmm.
or Randy Scouse Git. Those are the two songs that I tend to
Mm-hmm.
play a heck of a lot more than Daydream Believer.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to a point where songs so well, and you just can't. Not that you can't listen to them anymore, but maybe they don't have that, that sexiness that they did. I'm like that with Get Back and Come Together. There's a few Beatles songs that when they come on, I flip to the next one. And I know they're great, and I know their brilliance. And it's the same thing with Daydream Believer. Maybe you hear them just too many times that you just click over. I'm not that way with films. You could put on Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and I'll watch it over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And you can put on certain things, and man, I am going to listen to it. But that's one of the situations with songs where I gotta take a break from it for a while.
I would go with the Last Train to Clarksville, and I kind of see that as a composite of the Beatles song "A Ticket to Ride." But let me ask you something: Did the Monkees always play those instruments?
Well, first, let me give you a tidbit about Last Train to Clarksville. It was written by Bobby Hart and Tommy Boyce and Hart, who wrote a lot of their stuff. And that was written as a war protest song. You don't even realize, it's not that so much a love song, but I'm taking Last Train to Clarksville. I'll meet you at the station. I'll be there. I'm hoping that I'm coming home from war. I mean, this is a brilliant song. It's got that other level of besides being a great pop culture song. The question isn't whether the Monkees played their instruments, because years later they toured. Obviously, they're a real band, and they all were very, very accomplished musicians, especially Peter Tork and Mike Nesmith. The question was, did the Beach Boys? did the Mamas and the Papas. You can go down the list, the Grassroots. None of those bands. It was the Wrecking Crew. They had studio musicians play on those. There was too much invested in all those groups. It's only a handful, the Beatles, the Turtles, the Raiders. There's only a handful of groups who actually played their own instruments on the records. These record companies had.
Hey, Charles, I'm getting some kind of weird note on my Zoom. It's demanding me to upgrade in about 9 minutes. So if this thing shuts off, I'll call you right back.
Oh, no problem. Sounds good.
I think it might have something to do with Calendly, and I think there's a scheduling thing in there that tries to intertwine that.
40-minute deal, right? And then we re-up, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I should have known better than that. I just thought I'd try it out. All right, here we go. Rose says, does garlic really scare off Dracula, and does a steak really kill Dracula? If not, what does kill him?
Rosie. It's really funny. When we do our Dracula tours, I tell the people they should bring, garlic and hang it from their windows every night, to add to that mystique. If you shove a whole clove of garlic in anyone's mouth and seal their mouth, I think it's going to kill them. It will certainly bother a vampire, that's for sure. As far as a stake through the heart, that's going to do a number on anybody. Maybe not Superman, maybe not a superhero, but it's definitely going to do the trick. The fact that, a silver bullet will kill a werewolf, a stake will kill, a vampire, I just love it. It just adds to that little bit of lore, and it gives that extra bit of, it's cooler than, you shoot them and they'll die, It's what we said about, chopping off a head. It's what, getting a zombies, they have to be shot in the head. You got to add that one little extra bit to make it unique.
Okay, we got this question here. Prince, if this is for freely speak, it says, Prince Charles visited Transylvania and said, Vlad is his cousin. Are the royals really vampires?
I don't know, but that's a great question. In all the years that I've gone to Romania, boy, a lot of political stuff comes up, and I never heard that before. But if we're hearing it, it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. There's a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's get to this question here. Did you ever watch the movie Oculus, where the mirror is haunted?
Love that movie. I have a poster of it here, actually. Oculus was one of those ones that just sneaked in and out of the theaters. Never got a lot of fanfare. I don't know if there was a glut of films at the time or why, but before Conjuring got really big, and before a lot of those movies got really well known, and had I don't know why there wasn't an Oculus 2. It was certainly better than Ouija, certainly better than a lot of other films of its, I don't want to say genre, but of its time. Yeah, I liked Oculus.
Mm-hmm. In reviewing all the horror movies that you obviously have, and the research so very well done, especially in the book that you wrote, is there any movie that actually scared you more than just entertainment purposes? Like you left feeling maybe an attachment to some kind of negative energy?
That is a great question. So the only movie that ever gave me nightmares, if we can, quantify it that way, may not be a horror movie. It's a film where Alan Arkin played an evil guy and Audrey Hepburn played the blind girl. And it's a film by the name of Wait Until Dark. And is it a horror movie? Well, yeah, I think any home invasion film is a horror movie. And that movie, I don't know why, but somehow I was young, obviously, came home, went to bed, and woke up, but didn't wake up. I was dreaming. And I thought people were breaking into my house. It was one of, how you have the flu sometimes and you don't know if you're awake or asleep, and and that was one of those nights. It's the only film that ever gave me true nightmares. And, with all the horror movies I've seen and all the grotesque and slasher stuff, you would have thought that something else would have done it. But for some reason, that psychological thriller and that home invasion film did the trick. So I hope that answered your question, but it was Wait Until Dark. That was the only one that gave me nightmares.
I have one. It's kind of a sci-fi evil show, and it is called that did it for me. And now, of course, somebody else may just have enjoyed it. But Event Horizon, that movie because the theme for people who don't know, they sent a spaceship went into a black hole and it went into hell, basically space hell, and came back and it was alive, and it was done well enough for me to think I'm starting, I was feeling some evil there. I was thinking some evil. I was getting some kind of baggage with that movie, and usually, sci-fi, haunted, whatever. But that one for me, that was an event for me right there. All right, let's get to another question for you. Is it true vampires don't have a reflection?
If you believe in vampires, then you believe that they don't have a reflection. And shame on all those Twilight movies, because if those were vampires, they broke all the rules and ruined that ruined vampire movies for a very long time. And the argument was always, well, yeah, but look how many young girls it brought in that would love vampire films. No, it set back vampire films a long way, and zombies came in and took over for a while. Yeah, it's exactly right. If you're a vampire, you do not have a reflection in the water. In a mirror, you just do not have a reflection.
Okay, kind of goes with the lore there. Did you see the '79 movie Prophecy?
Yeah, I don't remember it too well. I definitely saw it, but for some reason, it didn't. Event Horizon stuck in my mind a heck of a lot more. Prophecy, yeah. If you asked me even what the plot was, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Probably something I got to revisit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's check in with the online poll that we have related to the show tonight. Who is Dracula? Choices are an oversized bat, a demon with sharp teeth, Count Chocula's cousin, a blood-sucking vampire, Boris Karloff, or the IRS demanding cash. Right? And they all seem like they're Draculas to me. Blood-sucking vampires. All right, so a demon with sharp teeth, number one. The IRS demanding cash is two. Count Chocula's cousin is in a tie with a blood-sucking vampire. Now, doesn't every horror show have some origin of truth?
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. Certainly, haunting movies do. My next book is called True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. And when I say, I emphasize that because I have 3 stories in the book, and everybody who contributed to the book are either paranormal investigators or just common folk who had that one amazing experience that they share. And the encounters that I had, I can't explain them. And so is there a different reason why there's something? Yeah, but everything does have a basis. And I think there's a reason why Boris Karloff did not get any votes. Because Bela Lugosi would have been the real good Dracula for that, or Christopher Lee. They might have gotten some votes. Anyway, yeah, I think there's a basis of truth in everything, whether it's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, whether it's Bram Stoker's Dracula, or anything that the Lorraine and Ed Warren have given us through the Conjurings and all that. Yeah, definitely.
So I'm born and raised in Indiana, so that makes me a Hoosier. And of course, a Hoosier is people who say, "Who's your daddy?" Or some people say it's a Kentuckian who got lost on his way to Michigan. So we don't know who the hell we're from or who the hell we are. But that being the late '60s, '70s, we had this classic television show for horror shows. The guy that ran it was named Sammy Terry. Have you ever heard of his name?
No, but every city had its horror host. In New York, it was Zachary. We still have Svengoolie. My persona is Cryptmaster Chucky. And there's every city had him. Elvira is probably the queen of those. And it's just, I wish they still had those, because they made watching monster movies more fun. They added a dimension to that, right?
Hey, if we get disconnected, I'm going to call you right back.
Right.
Hopefully I won't have that stupid message up there, and I'm going to edit it out when I edit the show. Okay, so we got this question here. What about the 2001 movie Jeepers Creepers?
I love Jeepers Creepers, and it's one of the few films that actually had some good sequels. You know, for me, Final Destination was another one of those where I would love the first one, and then the second one was just as good. You know, that whole school bus scene with the kids. Talk about Indiana. I had a great experience in October in Fort Wayne. They had a convention called DeadCon. It was the first one, and a lot of really great guests. And I came and did a book signing there, and I was on the authors panel. And I'm sworn on Indiana. I had a great time, and I don't know if that's a microcosm of the rest of the state, but some great people down there.
Okay, so we got at least 100 monsters running around. Which monster is most likely to be under the bed?
Which monster is? Oh my gosh! I can give you the real evil answer, and that's the uncle, the family uncle who's the molester. That's the scariest one. That is the freaking scariest one, because the real deal is what's scary, not the fictional stuff.
Yeah.
Not any of that. Let's look at this cover. You got Frankenstein, you got Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, and then that third one is the mystery one. It's between Bela Lugosi as Dracula and Lon Chaney as the Wolfman. People who don't know, it's Lon Chaney Sr. as a vampire in a film called London After Midnight, which never came out. It's never been found. It's a lost film. And I think that, Lon Chaney, who did all his own facial things without really adding any makeup, he would, maybe blur some teeth and, make faces. But if he came out of everyone here, if he came out under the bed, I think that one would put me on the ceiling. That's the one.
Now, for somebody who says that The Blob is their scariest movie, can you imagine a blob come running out? Say you're stretching out, you lower your hand down, and all of a sudden it's in a pile of goo, and that goo starts to pull you down, and pulling you under. You're almost under the bed. And that's the thing. Once Cryptmaster, once the creature grabs you, where does he take you?
So the blob would just consume you. You would become part of the blob. It's like what's that? The
Borg?
The killer plant. Jack Nicholson is in the original, and then it became a musical, Little Shop of Horrors. Where does the plant take you? Well, if you look at the end, they're part of the plant. They're in the stem. They're all that. So I think that's what the blob does. And the fact that the blob gets bigger and bigger and bigger, there's always that, oh my God, will he ever stop? Will it ever stop? Will it continue to get bigger and bigger till it takes over the planet?
I see some Southern boy in the live chat said it would be, when you talk about uncles, it'd be Uncle Fester.
Uncle Fester, the Chester molester.
Yes,
exactly.
That's definitely on there. Welcome in the live chat, Roxy W, RJ, Dolly, DS Shelton, Tony Fontenot. If you have a question for our guest tonight, just put them in the live chat. If you're watching on the website, the chat's on the left side. If you're watching on our YouTube streaming channel, it's on the right. Both of them are connected. So we're talking about all things monster. And so now we got the monster under the bed, but we also know... Crypt, that there's a monster in the closet. Now, what's that one most likely? That seems like somebody with an axe. I don't know.
A monster in a closet. We're going to reverse that, because one of the great scenes, and I'm not a big slasher, but I will respect the original John Carpenter Halloween. And when you put Jamie Lee Curtis in that closet, hiding from Michael Myers, that's the great closet scene. But you know what? You talk about something as silly and fun and goofy as Monster Incorporated, one of the early Pixar films. And what's brilliant is these comedy monsters lived off children's fears. And, how do you turn such an evil concept of that into comedy, into a cartoon? And they actually did very successfully. But yeah, that's what you're afraid of, right? Under the bed and in the closet. So what I would do is I would put all my toys. I mean, I would fill that bed underneath so there was no room for anything. I would leave the closet open. And then you know what? I felt kind of safe. There's always you can always come through that hole in the
Well, that's
ceiling.
all, Cryptmaster. That's all well and good until them toys start walking around. Okay, like a little Chucky doll. Suppose
Well,
you.
of course, because that's what the toys were. They were my original Aurora monsters, my famous monsters of Filmland monsters. So I was trying to keep monsters away by putting monsters under there.
Um, and what is it? I was thinking about the mask, and then I thought about the clowns. Is is it in the top 100?
Yeah.
Stephen King's
Oh,
It.
yeah.
Yeah, who goes with? Let's find out who goes with that one.
So many people picked it. Yeah. I don't know if let me see, it's in the top 10 of the top 10. So let me check. But yeah, that was a big one. And it was, don't forget, it came out twice and both were brilliant. The first one was with Tim Curry as Pennywise. And, that stuff brings up a whole nother analysis because along with all these other things with the tours and the books and all the things I do, I owned and founded and created a haunted house, one of these haunted attractions. It was called Fright Haven in Connecticut. I'm no longer running it. But the clown house was like, you'd have the old fashioned haunted house. You'd have maybe a pitch black, you'd have, a real high concept, and then you just fill the rooms with clowns. And people wouldn't come in. They go, wait, you have clowns? And they'd be too scared before they got in. I don't know what it is that scares people with clowns, but they sure get scared from those. Wow.
There's a series I used to love right there in our background there. Man, you talk about a monster movie show. That was great.
Oh, I'm bowing to it. I loved Kolchak. Darren McGavin was just so perfectly cast, and you call him the Monster a Week show. But that first one, the Night Stalker, and then the Night Strangler, that it was as good as as good as any horror movie that was in the theaters. Those two were brilliant.
Well, let me ask, did Kolchak actually ever capture a monster?
Because no, and did he lead his editor to believe that
right
that they existed? No, that was the great hook of that. It's just like Roy Thinnis in The Invaders. Did he ever convince the rest of the world that we were invaded? He knew that the pinky, he knew how to identify an alien, but no one else knew it except him. Kolchak was great, and it combined elements of comedy with horror, and sometimes those are your favorite type of movies.
Right, yeah. There's always that comedy element in there, and I just loved it. Like one time he's being chased by a zombie, and he tricks him into going into water. Then he throws an electrical thing in the water and shocks him. And so this is so much fun. Freely Speaking says, what was the 80s movie The Monster Squad all about?
Monster Squad, I recommend if any of our viewers or listeners have kids and they want to introduce them to monsters, it's a great scenario where Dracula comes into a town and he wants to take over with the Wolfman and all that. And Frankenstein turns into the good guy. Frankenstein's actually the hero in it. Monster Squad is great, and I highly recommend it if you really want to introduce your kids to horror. Don't show them The Exorcist. Don't let that be the first one. Not House of Corpses, not that one. Or even my mom, brought me in with Bride of Frankenstein. Bring them in with Monster Squad, and you'll have them hooked.
Now I had to look it up because I have a fear. Yes, I'm confessing it now. People who watch the show know I have a phobia of nutcrackers, and I believe the closest phobia description of that is called the automaton phobia, fear of human-like figures. Now the thing of it is, they got those gnarly teeth. All of them do. They're always standing by at Christmas time. They're kind of like standing there, but at night these things are moving around, and you can easily see like a knife in their hand, like a little Chucky doll.
Wow!
Can't deal with them. Can't deal with them at all, Jeff.
How has there not been a Nutcracker horror series? How has there not been a franchise of that? My gosh. When we used to do Fright Haven, the haunted house, one of my favorite scares, we had a guy on stilts, sort of Nutcracker-esque, and he would just stand still. and people would walk by and they'd look at him and they'd keep walking, thinking he was part of our, facade, that it was a statue. And all he would do is take that one step forward and you would see people fly, and a nutcracker would be a nice persona for that.
And all in all, though, there are some fun parts of this, but I mentioned, are things based in reality? Aren't all things based at some point of reality? I had, as you know, I've been doing this show since 2004, so thousands of interviews, whatnot. So I've talked to some people, exorcists in general, in that genre. There's one guy came on the show and said that he walked into a room. The people called him up, said the house needs exorcists. They had dolls in the house. He said he walked in the room and there were dolls there, and all those dolls were on a string, and they turned and looked at him. What is it about dolls? I guess that's one type of thing. There's some famous haunted dolls out there, and I know I can't bring the names up, but I'm sure you're aware of those.
Annabelle is one of the more famous ones.
And I mean, there's people that have put cameras on them and seen them move.
Yeah.
So what is it about dolls that whatever entity is inhabiting that form? Is it to reach us on a certain level of terror, or is it that it's a figure of a sort of a human person that is a shell closest to their entity being?
That's definitely what it is. If you believe that ghosts are energy, and I do believe that there is something there, and I do believe that 999% of it is positive, but there is that one that could be, you walk in a city and there's that one lunatic. So there's going to be one spirit that's going to be negative, that's going to be diabolical or demonic. And what's an easy thing to get into? A wall is tough, a floor is tough. Something that has personification, and a doll is probably the closest thing to that. A puppet would also be that. We haven't touched upon it, but I do paranormal investigations with a partner, and we're called the shaman and the showman. And he's the real deal. He's the shaman. He's an exorcist. He's an empath. He walks into a room and he can tell you, oh my God, this is where somebody passed away about a year ago. He has that power. I'm the showman. I'm the one who's, yucking it up and bringing people to the events. Together, we produce Paracon, Paraconn, right, which isn't he probably even in your notes. We produce Connecticut's paranormal convention. And so I'm very, very now, for the first time in my life, after doing all these ghost tours and Dracula tours and all this, I'm really attuned to the paranormal like I never have been before. And I understand that there's people who are conduits to that and can sense things. And it's a whole nother level of, it's a sixth sense, so to speak. And he has a collection of haunted artifacts. And one of those is like the Jerry Mahoney. He has a Jerry Mahoney puppet, one of those little dolls. And he swears, at any given night, it'll turn its head and look at him. It's fallen off its shelf for no reason. And he's yet to determine who the spirit is that's in it, but he's sure there's a spirit in it.
I see Jade, our moderator in the live chat, mentioned Robert the Haunted Doll. That's a world famous haunted doll there. I think that's one of the ones that they filmed moving around at night. But dolls, and I see other people have said that dolls are a sort of a scary thing. So the entities that inhabit these inanimate objects, they yes, animate them, I guess, so to speak.
Yes.
There's a reality there. Do you ever feel like that they might want to move from an inanimate object to maybe a human being themselves?
I'm sure they would love to. I really think so. I did an investigation at an old opera house. And, before there was movie theaters, there were these opera houses, and they were burlesque. They would have shows. And every town, if you were on a train station, you would have a fancy hotel and you would have an opera house. And most of them have closed up. There's very few that are still around. But we did an investigation in Ansonia, Connecticut, in what was called the Ansonia Opera House. And I went with my partner, Nick, who's the shaman. and I get nothing. I feel no cold in areas where people are feeling different chills. I get no vibrations from the walls. But he told me to take a ton of pictures. And sure enough, we took one picture. I took a picture of a doorway and never looked at my camera, my phone until I got home. And there's a figure in that doorway. And then he told me an area of the opera house not far from the stage where I should be taking a lot of pictures. He said he was getting all this energy of people. Now, yes, why would an opera house be haunted? Why would theaters be haunted? Well, people, once their bodies disappear and there's a soul that might be left over, maybe they go to places that gave them a lot of pleasure. They're not there to do anything, in any kind of evil way. They're just still in a place where they had joy, where they had fun, where they had, social activity. So when new people are coming in there, they don't understand that they're not part of that. So they're making themselves as visible as they can. Now, they may not make that to the naked eye, and they may not make it to the layman like myself who doesn't have, psychic abilities. But I took pictures there, and sure enough, there's these two entities just levitating across the room, and they look like Nosferatu apparitions. And I'm putting them in the book because the photos are just so wow. You drop your jaw when you see things that you just don't expect to see because you didn't see them at the time. And then they show up in film. So there's probably levels of that, and there's probably scenarios where they want to come back, and they want to, whether they're in dolls or can somehow infest themselves in a human body. Yeah, you got to believe that that's what they would want to do.
Well, you talk about showing up in film. Another type of thing that you can't see is the orbs. Orbs, always, people don't see them until they look at the pictures. And another one is electronic voice phenomena. I mean, I've heard it myself. And one of the classic ones is, I don't know if I told you last time, but, I was in a graveyard, and me and my sons asked we're out this grave, and I said, is there anybody here? Nothing. And so we had the recorder going. We're walking away, and just for kicks, laughs, and giggles, I just played back to nothing and says, is anybody here? And clear as day, the voice said, turn around. And I didn't hear that. None of us heard it. So there's something about that. So I'm thinking there's maybe a spiritual component, a negative component, invisibility thing going on here because you can't see it, and things have to animate objects like dolls and clowns and nutcrackers. But doesn't that mean there's a whole nother world that surrounds us?
Perhaps.
That's not necessarily a leap there, is it?
No, I mean, I think that as we generations will go on and more people have psychic abilities, I think that if there is that world, that it will come closer and we'll have an understanding of it. You'd like to think that, that when you pass on, you're going to rejoin loved ones, right? And you'd like to think that those loved ones are looking over us and they're with us and they're, hopefully steering us in the right direction. Or if they're evil, maybe they're steering their offspring in the wrong direction. Yeah, you would think so.
Well, Charles, let me ask you, do you think that subconsciously in some way that you looking into horror and then, then it verges into ghost pictures like you saw, or maybe you'll see a haunted doll move or something. Do you think some innate thing in the back of your mind is actually looking for proof that there is an afterlife?
No. I always say that if there's something that wants to be found, it will find its way to show that, and let it show it to the paranormal experts who will be able to deal with it better. When I go out on these investigations, I think I'm there more as a reporter. I'm there more as someone who might someday write about it or take the picture. I'm chronicling it for others. I don't want to be that the magnet for that. I don't want to have the experiences that others have.
Well,
So
you certainly put a happy face to the whole genre. So, like you say, you are the consummate showman. That's for daggone sure. Anybody, you look, hey, I got it too, man, because I'm the cosmic cowboy, and you're the Cryptmaster Chucky. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, you know. And
yeah.
so, all right, let's get to a couple more questions before the show gets too late here. Um, Constant Companion says, Chuck, did Rear Window rank with any of your celebrities in the book?
If it didn't, it's a disgrace that it didn't, because that film is up there with the best of Hitchcock's, and it's studied in schools. Rear Window, only one person picked it. 1954 Rear Window by with Jimmy Stewart, and Barry Williams of the Brady Bunch
No.
picked it, and I'm shocked that it didn't get more. But then again, you know, one of my favorite movies of all time wasn't picked by any. And then when I mentioned it, people said, "Huh? What is that movie?" It's something called Phantom of the Paradise, and you probably never heard of it. It's a combination. It's a rock horror musical by Paul Williams. It combines Jekyll and Hyde. It combines Dorian Gray, and it combines Phantom of the Opera. And it's to me better than Rocky Horror Picture Show when you talk about horror rock musicals. And so few people have heard of it, and it didn't make the book. So the fact that Rear Window only got one vote, all right, there's an excuse for that.
You know,
that's a great one.
I think maybe the origin of my automaton phobia, that is the fear of nutcrackers, can go back to the Twilight Zone. I can thank them for the classic Talking Tina doll. Are you familiar with that episode?
Yes, very much so.
And the classic line, "My name is Talking Tina." Wait a minute. Hang on. Hang on.
My name is Talking Tina, and I don't like you.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, and that guy, I think it was Telly Savalas, man. He tried cutting that doll. He tried torching that doll, no matter what he did. And then that doll would be sitting there and all of a sudden just look at him, you know. That was scary. And you notice you mentioned puppets. I don't know how many Twilight Zone have puppets in there that they're always animating themselves coming at you. So I think that's probably the root cause.
One of the best puppet horror movies did not make this book. It was one of Anthony Hopkins' first genre roles, a movie called Magic. And if our people paying attention to the show haven't seen it, it's worth finding. It's really special.
Okay. Freely Speaking says, which serial killers based their killings on Dracula?
You know, I guess there have been copycat versions of every killer. In London, there was definitely someone who killed people by sucking their blood. He was the Highgate vampire and spent most of his time in the Highgate area of London, including the cemetery there. So yeah, you know what? I'm sure every serial killer had inspiration for the way they decided to do it. And the fact that there's so many serial killer movies, I'm surprised and thankful that people haven't studied it and followed the films.
What's the psychological bent that causes us to be terrorized when somebody has a hockey mask on rather than, say, a ski mask or maybe the V mask? But the hockey mask, that does it for a lot of people, man. What is it about hockey? I mean, it's hockey.
Yeah,
is a serial killer, is he a hockey guy or what? I don't know.
Why are we scared of that William Shatner or Michael Jackson mask from Halloween? It's the fact that Friday the 13th put it in our brains that Jason kills with the hockey mask. We weren't scared of hockey masks before then, believe me. And there weren't that many hockey masks in the years that hockey started, you know. So that's really the reason, you know, of just the identification with the films.
Sounds like Jason was the best thing ever happened to hockey. Rose says, have you ever watched Paranormal State?
No, is that I don't Rose, is that one of those TV shows like Ghost Adventures and all those? I have never watched any of them except Most Haunted, which was one of the British shows, and I watched it because I have a dear friend, Richard Felix, who hosts when we do ghost tours to England. He hosts with me. So that's the only time I ever watched any of them, to hear his input, because, he's very analytical of ghosts. And it's great when somebody does what Richard Felix does or what I do and go to these places and things happen, but we're still skeptical. We still, it's happening, but there's got to be a reason. What's the reason? Right?
Yeah. How about it's just creepy and there's some creepy stuff going on? All right. Who's scarier, Kathy Bates in Misery or the owl doll in Ex Machina?
Whoa. You've got some brilliant questions coming through. I'm going to say Kathy Bates, because there's a lot of Kathy Bates there. There's a lot of everyone who's a celebrity has to fear that fan, that super fan, whether it's Patton Oswalt in the movie he was in, The Fan, whatever that was, with De Niro. There's always that possibility that a fan will take it just too far. And I think the worst example of that, or the best as it might be, is John Lennon's fan. And whether he was a fan or not, or whether he was obsessed, or whether he heard voices in his head, that's the extreme, but that's the reality. And Kathy Bates, my God, did she play that perfectly? Anyone could have been in the James Caan role. And I actually saw there was a Broadway show of that with Bruce Willis as the role of the author. And the actress was the gal from Roseanne, the sister. And it was superbly played too. But, we were talking so much about Alfred Hitchcock, and we didn't even touch on Stephen King. And as far as I'm concerned, the greatest horror writer of all time. Sometimes the films click, sometimes they don't. But just Misery is up there with his genius.
Yeah, when she's not breaking legs, that's all right, so that's about the end of the questions list there. I think if anybody has any questions, put them in there. We're about ready to wrap this up. Well, Cryptmaster, what's your next project? You mentioned it earlier in the broadcast. What's going on? How can people get involved in what you do?
So too many things. So if they want to come with me to Transylvania on the Dracula tour, it's www.dractours.com.
What was it now? What was it? They go somewhere and they fly, or they fly there and meet you there, or y'all go as a group?
We normally will all meet in New York. That's usually the hub. People will come from all over the country. We meet in New York and we fly together as a group to Romania, to Bucharest, and we spend a week there. And it's the ultimate. It's just, when you think, is there really a Transylvania? Or do you think people actually will go there on a tour? This is amazing. Yes, we do. And we do it every Halloween. We spend Halloween night in Dracula's castle. We visit Bram Castle, which is the one that you see in all the movies. And we visit Vlad's Ponary Castle, which was the real deal, where Vlad actually lived, where his wife, was thrown off and all that. So that's the ultimate. I also produce Paracon, PARACONN.org, not .com. It's the Connecticut Paranormal Convention, and this will be our second year. We're having it in July. The next project is True Ghost Stories of Connecticut, which is coming out in June. And you can Google it. It'll be on Amazon. But the book that we've been pushing today is my first one. It's the Book of Top 10 Horror Lists, and you can look it up as Book of Top 10 Horror Lists.com. Thank you. I have it backwards. You have it forward. And if people, write to the website, I'll send an autographed copy. People love getting an author's signature in a book. And it's just not stopping. Every month I do a paranormal investigation as part of my shaman and showman thing. But it's very, very regional, very territorial. So if you're living in Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, come join us. Otherwise, visit our website and find out about all the things we do and enjoy it secondhand.
Well, you're the happiest scary guy I know, man.
Do I give a good energy or what? I am so happy to be talking to you after how many years? 15 years, maybe 10 years?
Long time.
It's great to be back. So, it's a Saturday night. It's the last time we were supposed to be on, and tonight are the only two nights I'm not DJing. I'd be out doing a wedding. I'd be going and
Wow.
entertaining people. So I'm still in that entertainment mode on a Saturday night. That's
Right.
what it is.
Right, right. That's right. You'd be doing Thriller, right? This is Thriller.
Not likely, but possibly.
Hey, I tell you what though, I was invited to a wedding and they were playing Thriller, and somehow they got me out there.
Were you doing it? Were you
Yeah,
doing
oh
it?
yeah, oh yeah.
Wow.
Hey, can't put that past the Cosmic Cowboy. All right,
Well-
Charles Rosenay, aka Cryptmaster Chucky. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
So great. Let's not wait another 10 years.
No, we can't, man. We have too much fun. We'll get you back on the show.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much.
All right, goodbye. All right, everybody. That was Cryptmaster Chucky, aka Charles